The next key barrier that trips people up is the struggle with intense feelings. And I think of this, it can be like a secondary spike. We work with the primary spike, we diffuse the obsession, we let go of the mental compulsion, and then OCD goes into the body more, and the feeling gets more intense that then pulls us back into the rumination or the physical compulsions. It convinces us there really is a genuine danger, or increases our doubt and confusion about what we're feeling, or really is pushing us to avoid things or figure things out, solve the uncertainty. Links to beliefs as well. It links to beliefs that this feeling is so intense, it must be real. So it can feed that cycle of, maybe this is an OCD, maybe this is a genuine um, threat or danger, or I am this person that I don't want to be, or maybe I do want to be this person, or I do want to do these things, or these things really are going to happen. So we use this belief that intense feelings are always meaningful and always pull us back in. So it can trip us up in these two ways. It can be just the feelings themselves are so intense that it's so hard to sit with them and work with them, so we avoid kind of recovery work. Or it can be that they feed the belief that this must be something that is true and a genuine thing to take seriously, a signal rather than noise. And this can trip people up because it's very hard to do ERP if these intense feelings are coming up, or we don't want to treat it as OCD to work on exposure work because it feels so believable. So we might want to do some tackling of beliefs at the beginning, and really being honest about the fact that strong feelings are not always meaningful. Our nervous system is not evolved to give us accurate feedback about the world continuously. If I listened to every emotion that I ever felt and thought they were all meaningful, well, I probably wouldn't have passed my driving test. I probably wouldn't have, done anything challenging in life. You probably wouldn't have, asked people out that you want to date, or gone to certain events, or competed, or, if these meaningful feelings that are so intense and try and push us to not do things or to figure things out, if they were so accurate and important, there's many things in our life we wouldn't have done. And evolution just hasn't selected for a nervous system that's 100% accurate and always giving us good information. It's evolved to select for threat focused, better safe than sorry reactions, to assume that the rope on the floor is a snake rather than a rope, because, like, if it's a rope and I think it's a snake, well, I move away from it, I don't lose anything. But if it's a snake and I think it's a rope, it's going to bite me and I'm going to die. So evolution has selected us just to be very threat focused, and for our emotional system to be quite reactive, really. And there's a range of that in people. Some people lucked out and their nervous system isn't so reactive and so intense, and their emotional arousal doesn't go so high. But many of us with OCD, we're more the alarm system within the tribe. We're more the part of the tribe that's looking for danger and trying to keep everyone safe. So unfortunately, that goes alongside with a loud nervous system that can generate very intense feelings. Um, Often in ERP, people are told to just sit with these feelings. I always used to think, when therapists told me that, I used to think, well, I'd like to see you sit with this feeling. And then, people would say, well, I know what anxiety is like, or, I get anxious in my life. And I would think, well, really, there's a big difference between having anxiety, but at the heart having a belief that you're going to be okay and things are going to go all right, versus having anxiety or panic and genuinely thinking you're about to die, or the worst things are going to happen in the next moment. They don't compare. Yeah, they have some of the same physiological markers and same kind of valence, but the intensity and the loudness of that emotion is so dramatically different, and the impact on our functioning is different, that often it isn't as simple as just sit with an emotion. And many of the therapists and people saying this don't have intense, strong emotional reactions that are pretty debilitating and intense. Now, it's not to say we can't build up the ability to sit with them. And in fact, that's exactly what we want to do. But it's just, to be honest, that is not a simple thing that everyone can do easily. And I think it's why there are a large dropout rates in ERP often. You know, people get told to do that and they try to sit with it and they can't because it's so intense. And then they might blame themselves or feel the therapy doesn't work, or you know, feel hopeless, when really, um, we've got to build up to it. We've got to work our skills and get stronger. You know, there can be core fears underneath these strong emotions. We can worry about health impacts. You know, there can be sort of panic, fears around, is it a heart attack? Is it a physical symptom? Or am I going psychotic? Am I losing my mind in some way? Or it can be more social embarrassment. You know, I'm going to look really anxious and everyone's going to judge me and that's going to be awful. Or it can be, it's just going to wreck my enjoyment. I can't enjoy life when I feel this intensely anxious. So all of those sort of fears and beliefs can sit within these intense experiences. And, um, you know, it's just very hard to just sit with it. I think you need something a little bit more than that. People would say, okay, you need to stop ruminating, stop monitoring the feelings, then they will go away and we won't have anxiety. I don't think there's any evidence that I've seen, you know, in the world of sort of neuroscience of emotion, or, you know, emotion regulation science, things like that, that show there's a way to so predictably bring down anxiety. But I think, you know, that does happen. The less we struggle, unless we fight with emotion, yeah, it comes down in intensity. But it's a paradox. It only happens when we're genuinely willing to feel that emotion. For me, when I was really struggling with OCD, I would wake up with panic symptoms and they would roll like that throughout the day. You know, they weren't, you know, at the maximum intensity the whole time, but they were going up and down through that maximum intensity. And I used to laugh at the textbooks that, or I used to find it funny when textbooks say, oh, a panic attack is 20 minutes and it's a predictable arc, and, you know, and then it passes, you just go right through it. I was like, this is just going on all day, relentlessly. At one point, I lost 2 stone in a month because I couldn't eat because of the level of panic I was feeling, and yeah, all day long in kind of my stomach, I just couldn't hold food down. And many of us with OCD will relate to that and will have felt that. And so to tell people just to sit with that, I think it's unrealistic. Now, you can try things like DBT. A lot of good therapists bring in dialectical behavior therapy, or other emotion regulation techniques. And I think there's nothing wrong with trying that stuff, and they're an option. And for some people, they seem to be helpful. For me, when I was really in the depths of OCD, I couldn't regulate the emotions, and anything I did to try and do that would make them worse. And that was where what really pushed me towards ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, was that was the most helpful thing, was learning to be with this emotion and not control it, not get rid of it, and to let it be there without reacting, and let it just rise and fall and do whatever it wanted to do. That was the most helpful thing. So I'm quite passionate about that idea and how to develop that skill. But, you know, I have certainly worked with people and met people that have found, some of the emotion regulation techniques that are particularly found in DBT is one of the best places to find them. And they're also in compassion focused therapy, as well. You know, they can be helpful for people. So that's an option to try that if you are struggling with this hugely intense emotion. But ACT wise, we would build up our skills and then try to apply them to more and more intense emotions. And that was what was most helpful for me. And you can integrate compassion into that. In fact, I would advocate that you do that, that it adds a bit of extra, power to the acceptance skills, really, to, bring in compassion and self-compassion. Um, so yeah, we need to tackle those beliefs that are telling us that this, it must not be OCD because the intensity of the feelings. and all these beliefs about whether we can handle them, and not wanting to have them. Unfortunately, we do have them, and the way out of it is through it, and the way out of it is to get better at experiencing those emotions. So what can we do to do that? Well, I would say, building up your skills first before doing exposure work is really helpful. So things like dropping anchor, urge surfing, the acceptance skills that I have on this channel, like name and dipping in and out of the stream for threat monitoring, doing those practices that you find in the OCD playlist, and working that up so that those muscles are really strong before you then go and tackle more challenging things, can be very helpful. And you can make adaptations to dropping anchor. A really good adaptation to make is, if your emotional arousal is just really high, i.e., you're in that kind of panic all the time, then you make it a very brief acknowledge step. You notice and name the emotion very briefly, and you spend a lot longer getting into your body and moving and stretching and feeling your body, breathing if breath is helpful as a support, not as a control, but as a support to acceptance and present moment attention. You then spend longer engaging, and you might do the grounding techniques of, 5 things you can see, and 4 things you can hear, and 3 things you can touch, and engaging with your senses like that. Or you might just notice and describe what's around you, and kind of engage with the world, describing it, the things that stand out to you, the green plant, the blue sky, the books on the shelf. You're trying to observe and describe. Or better still, often, is actually engage in a task. So you briefly acknowledge, get into your body, and then you engage in something quite physical, like tidying your house, or going for a walk, or doing a physical practice of some sort, yoga or exercise or something like that. So you do something more physical as the thing to engage with, and that can facilitate more acceptance. So that would be the number one thing, is doing dropping anchor in that way, until you feel more comfortable in that high emotion and it's not so frightening to face it. Then we might be able to move towards ERP. I like the acceptance tools in ACT, things like the tin can monster, where you break the emotion up into all its different pieces. I think Stephen Hayes's ideas about working with the reaction to the emotion, so you have the feeling of panic, or depression, or whatever it might be, and then you have a secondary layer of mental judgment and resistance, and maybe physical resistance to it, and you work acceptance with both those pieces. That's very helpful. I really like Russ Harris's name technique, is very good, or tame. He's got another version of it in the New Happiness Trap. So name or tame, which really for me is about dividing something up into pieces, and then curiously investigating one of the pieces to build up acceptance. As you do that, diffusing from the judgment thoughts, because they are often the thing that really amplifies the feeling. It's the thoughts of, I can't handle this is too overwhelming, I can't enjoy life with this, I'm going mad, I'm going to die. Those thoughts are often the thing that really amplifies it. So you have to be doing diffusion and acceptance together with very intense feelings, and working those different pieces of it, and then engaging in life. So you could work those different acceptance tools. I put my favorite ones on this channel, and you can add in compassion. So you can add in the kind hand, compassionate self-talk, compassionate action, so turning towards actions that are particularly soothing and supportive and kind, and what you need to do in that moment. And often social connection, and not necessarily talking about the distress even, but connecting with people and doing actions and activities together, and focusing on those with people. It's very important to see this stuff not as distraction. I try and focus on this to push this away, to get rid of this. And it can work when this is highly engaging, or this is promoting sort of flow states because it's a challenging activity, or we've got enough focus on it. But when we're really distressed, we can't do that. We won't be able to focus well enough. And also, this will work for a temporary period, and then this will come back very intensely. So it's not the distraction is the end of the world in terms of emotion regulation, and certainly in DBT they use that. But in ACT, we would talk more about acceptance and engagement. So we're, acceptance of the difficult thing and then engagement in values. So this can be here in the background, and I'm going to engage in what matters. And if this comes forward, I'm going to acknowledge and accept it and diffuse the thoughts, and then I'm going to engage. So it's a more flexible attention that can include the difficulty as well as focusing in on what matters. And it's not, the ideal thing is we can let that difficult feeling be there at any level and engage in life. And if you get very skilled at this, it's actually a very enjoyable and satisfying thing when you start to feel like you're mastering these intense emotions and you can feel them and engage in values. I think that's like a tipping point where your skills get really stronger because you're actually really accepting it. And you even see the value of being able to handle intense emotions, because really we're going to have those in life. We're going to face them as we go through the ups and downs and suffering and aging process and everything in life, and ultimately death. We're going to have these intense feelings at different times, different emotions, and to be really skillful with them rather than imagine, I could get rid of them or find some clever way to, get rid of these emotions. I personally think that's quite a liberating attitude, and something we can practice and cultivate and develop. Whereas the agenda of finding the magical cure, in my experience, it doesn't work. Maybe there will be one day. Great, if that works for people at that point, brilliant. But at this point, there's nothing that does that without a cost to it, and nothing that does it predictably and works well and allows you to stay engaged with your values and the people that matter to you. So really, this is a more liberating sort of attitude. So yeah, with these intense feelings, we want to work on the beliefs that pull us back into OCD cycles, that we basically use this as either reassurance or actually as something that triggers us more into OCD. The feelings trigger us more into the doubt and confusion again. But sometimes they can be reassuring. Sometimes it's, oh, I feel so awful that I must not want this. And then that becomes a reassurance cycle as well. But really tackling those beliefs about intense feelings, that they're not meaningful, and feelings are just a bit of information. Sometimes they have some use in them, and a lot of the time they don't, unfortunately, because of the way our nervous system has evolved. And then we want to work on our skills, get our skills very strong, and then start approaching ERP in service of values, trying to do a gradual step by step, at least to begin with. Sometimes you can't do that because you're triggered so easily by everything. There's not a way of doing it in a gradated way. But if you can, that can be a good way to start. What's a gradual thing? Or you work with other emotions. You work with acceptance of sadness or anger, frustration, other things before you move into the intense emotions that you're struggling with. And then, or you work with acceptance of physical things, like you go and exercise hard and work on accepting your heart pounding and being out of breath, or cold water exposure or something like that. You work on acceptance with those things and then bring it into acceptance of intense feelings. And and then building it up piece by piece and then applying it in ERP work. And just to be really compassionate, that those of us with OCD, we are often dealing with more intense feelings. Especially, I have clients with autism and other things in the mix as well. And to tell someone experiencing that level of emotion dysregulation in their nervous system to just sit with it, I mean, it just is completely unrealistic. So we've got to be honest that many of us with OCD are experiencing very loud nervous systems, very intense emotions that aren't just like everyday anxiety, or if they're not so intense, the belief beneath them is more believable. So we are having the panic attack and feeling like the world's going to end and really genuinely believing that. Whereas you can have panic-like symptoms and kind of know it's panic and know you're going to be okay. And those two things aren't comparable. They're not the same. And so we've got to build up a lot of courage and a lot of strength to face the really high emotions where we really believe, we really feel like we're about to die, or people we love are about to die, or things are going to go wrong, our whole life's going to be ruined. That is hard to work on, but very doable and possible. We just got to build it up step by step by step. And I've tried to lay out ideas of how to do that on this channel. So, have a look at the OCD skills playlist, and work your way through some of those skills. And if emotions are particularly a tripping point, do the modified drop-in anchor, do the name and acceptance practices, the threat monitoring practices. And then once you feel more able to be with intense emotions, then apply them in ERP.